It's 1939, and the skies over Europe are about to become the deadliest battlefield humanity has ever seen. German aircraft are rolling off assembly lines at an unprecedented rate, each one a testament to engineering brilliance or catastrophic failure. But here's what nobody tells you. Not all German planes were the legendary war machines we see in movies. Some were absolute nightmares that killed more of their own pilots than enemy fighters ever could. So which German aircraft actually ruled the skies, and which ones were flying coffins? Let me take you through every single one, ranked from worst to best, and trust me, some of these stories will shock you. At the bottom of our list sits the Heinkel He-177 Greif, and calling this aircraft a disaster would be generous. Imagine being a German pilot in 1942, climbing into what looks like a powerful heavy bomber, only to discover it's essentially a flying time bomb. The He-177 had a fatal design flaw. Its engines were coupled in pairs, sharing a single propeller. Sounds efficient, right? Wrong. These engines overheated constantly, bursting into flames mid-flight so often that crews nicknamed it the Flaming Coffin. Out of 1,000 units built, hundreds never saw combat. They simply burned up during testing or training flights. Crews would be flying routine missions when suddenly smoke would fill the cockpit. Flames would erupt from the engine nacelles, and they'd have mere seconds to bail out before the entire aircraft became an inferno. The question everyone asked was simple. How did German engineers, known for precision and excellence, create something so fundamentally broken? The answer reveals something crucial about wartime aircraft development. Pressure. The Luftwaffe demanded a heavy bomber that could dive bomb, which required a sleek design. This led to the coupled engine configuration, which looked good on paper but was a death trap in practice. Engineers knew about the problems but were forced to continue production anyway. Political pressure, deadlines, and the desperate needs of war pushed a fatally flawed design into service. How many young men died because bureaucrats refused to admit a mistake? Moving up slightly, we encounter the Messerschmitt Me 210, a plane so poorly designed that it nearly destroyed Messerschmitt as a company. Introduced in 1941 as a replacement for the successful Bf 110, the Me 210 was supposed to be faster, more maneuverable, and deadlier. Instead, it was unstable, difficult to control, and had a disturbing tendency to enter unrecoverable spins. Test pilots refused to fly it. Luftwaffe squadrons rejected it. The German high command was furious. Picture the scene. Experienced pilots climbing into this new aircraft, taking off confidently, only to find the controls fighting them at every turn. The plane would suddenly pitch or yaw without warning. During turns, it became unpredictable. Several test pilots died trying to master it. Messerschmitt had to halt production, redesign almost everything, and reintroduce it as the Me 410, which was merely adequate. Millions of Reichsmarks and countless hours were wasted on an aircraft that should never have left the drawing board. The Me 210 scandal nearly led to criminal charges against company leadership. It stands as a cautionary tale about overconfidence and inadequate testing. Now, here's where things get interesting. The Henschel HS-129 was designed with one specific purpose: destroying Soviet tanks on the Eastern Front. Armed with a 75mm cannon, yes, a cannon that belonged on a tank, this ground attack aircraft should have been a game-changer. But there was a problem. Actually, there are several problems. The cockpit was so cramped that pilots compared it to sitting inside a coffin. Visibility was terrible, with thick armor plating blocking the pilot's view in almost every direction. The armor, while protective, made the plane slow and sluggish. And that massive 75mm cannon? It created so much recoil that firing it felt like hitting a brick wall at full speed. The entire aircraft would shudder, sometimes knocking the plane off course. But when it worked, it was devastating. Soviet tank crews feared the HS-129 more than almost any other German weapon. That 75mm cannon could punch through the top armor of any Soviet tank, and pilots learned to attack from above and behind, where tanks were most vulnerable. The HS-129 destroyed hundreds, perhaps thousands of Soviet armored vehicles. Yet it required pilots with nerves of steel and exceptional skill. Most avoided it whenever possible, preferring more conventional aircraft. Would you want to fly a plane that felt like it was trying to shake itself apart every time you fired your main weapon? The Dornier WW2 deserves mention as a capable but unspectacular medium bomber. Could carry more bombs than the famous WW8, had longer range, and featured advanced equipment for night operations. WW217s conducted some of the most daring raids of the war, including attacks on British cities and shipping. Some variants carried early guided missiles, radio-controlled bombs that pilots could steer toward targets. In 1943, a WW217 using a Fritz X guided bomb sank the Italian battleship Roma, one of the first times a ship was destroyed by a precision-guided weapon. Yet the WW217 remained in the shadow of other bombers, never receiving the recognition it deserved. Sometimes being competent but not exceptional means being forgotten by history. The Arado AR-234 Blitz deserves special mention because it was the world's first operational jet bomber. Think about that for a moment. In 1944, while most nations were still perfecting propeller aircraft, Germany had jets conducting bombing raids. The AR-234 was fast, reaching speeds of 460 miles per hour, making it nearly impossible for Allied fighters to intercept. It could photograph enemy positions with impunity and drop bombs before anyone knew it was there. During the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, AR-234s conducted reconnaissance missions that gave German commanders crucial intelligence about Allied positions. Allied fighter pilots would spot them, give chase, and watch helplessly as the sleek jet simply accelerated away. So why isn't it ranked higher? Simple, it arrived too late and in too few numbers. Only 210 were built, and by the time they entered service, Germany was already losing the war. Fuel shortages meant many sat grounded. The Allied advance overran airfields before AR-234 units could fully deploy. The AR-234 represented technological brilliance rendered meaningless by timing. What could have happened if Germany had developed it 2 years earlier? Could jet bombers have changed the outcome of major battles? We'll never know, and that uncertainty haunts military historians to this day. Let's talk about the Junkers Ju-88, arguably the most versatile aircraft of the entire war. This medium bomber could do everything: level bombing, dive bombing, night fighting, torpedo attacks, reconnaissance, and even ground attack. British pilots called it the German maid of all work, and they meant it as a compliment. The Ju-88 served on every front, from the frozen North Atlantic to the scorching deserts of North Africa, from the Battle of Britain to the final defense of Berlin. Over 15,000 were produced, and it remained in service from 1939 until Germany's surrender in 1945. What made the Ju-88 special wasn't any single extraordinary characteristic. It was the combination of reliability, adaptability, and effectiveness. Need to bomb a British factory? The Ju-88 could do it. Need to hunt Allied convoys at night? Equip it with radar and it became a capable night fighter. Need to sink ships in the Mediterranean? Add a torpedo and specialized training. The Ju-88 wasn't the fastest or the most heavily armed, but it was reliable, adaptable, and effective. Crews trusted it. Mechanics could repair it. Commanders could deploy it for almost any mission. Sometimes being consistently good beats being occasionally great. How many military planners today wish they had equipment as versatile as the Ju-88? The Heinkel He-111 was the Luftwaffe's standard medium bomber at the war's beginning and became one of the conflict's most recognizable silhouettes. With its distinctive greenhouse nose and elliptical wings, the He-111 led the attacks on Poland, demolished Rotterdam, and filled the skies during the Battle of Britain. For a time, it represented German air power's terrifying reach. Thousands of British civilians died under the bombs carried by He-111s during the Blitz. The psychological impact of hearing their engines drone overhead, knowing destruction would follow, cannot be overstated. However, the He-111 had significant weaknesses. It was relatively slow, making it vulnerable to modern fighters. Defensive armament was inadequate. British fighters could attack from angles where the He-111's gunners couldn't effectively respond. As the war progressed and Allied air defenses improved, He-111 losses mounted dramatically. By 1942, daylight bombing missions became suicidal. The He-111 shifted to night operations, where darkness provided some protection. It served until the war's end, but its glory days were brief. The He-111 story reminds us that what works brilliantly in one context can become obsolete frighteningly fast when circumstances change. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 enters our rankings here, and this is where we start seeing true excellence. When the FW-190 first appeared over France in 1941, British Spitfire pilots couldn't believe what they were facing. This German fighter was faster, could roll quicker, carried more ammunition, and could take tremendous punishment. For nearly a year, the FW-190 dominated the skies, outperforming every Allied fighter it encountered. Royal Air Force pilots nicknamed this period the Focke-Wulf Scourge. Squadrons that had confidently engaged Bf-109s suddenly found themselves outmatched and desperate. Kurt Tank, its designer, had created something special, a radial engine fighter that combined raw power with surprising agility. The BMW radial engine was air-cooled, making it more resistant to battle damage than liquid-cooled engines. Hit the cooling system on a Bf-109 or Spitfire, and it would overheat and seize within minutes. Hit an FW-190's radial engine, and it could keep running despite significant damage. At low and medium altitudes, nothing could touch it. Luftwaffe pilots who transitioned from the Bf-109 to the FW-190 felt like they'd upgraded from a sports car to a muscle car. The Americans and British scrambled to develop counters, eventually creating the P-51D Mustang and Spitfire Mk-14 specifically to match the FW-190's capabilities. The FW-190 evolved throughout the war, with versions specialized for different roles. The A-series dominated air combat. The F and G variants became fearsome ground attack aircraft, destroying Allied tanks and positions with rockets and bombs. The D-series, with a liquid-cooled inline engine, competed against the best Allied fighters even in 1945. The ultimate evolution, the Ta-152, reached altitudes and speeds that few other piston-engine fighters could match. Some aviation historians argue it was the finest piston-engine fighter ever built, though it came too late to matter. Can you imagine being an Allied pilot in 1945, thinking the war is nearly won, and suddenly encountering a Ta-152 that can outclimb, outrun, and outfight anything you're flying? But what about the plane that started it all? The Messerschmitt Bf-109 was the Luftwaffe's primary fighter throughout the entire war, with over 33,000 built, more than any other fighter aircraft in history. From the Spanish Civil War in 1936 to the last days of World War II, the Bf-109 was there. Early versions were nimble and fast, giving German pilots a significant advantage during the invasion of Poland and France. Experienced pilots loved its responsiveness and climb rate. The Bf-109 could zoom up to altitude faster than almost any opponent, giving German pilots the tactical advantage of height. The Bf-109E, or Emil, fought in the Battle of Britain, where its main limitation became apparent: limited range. German fighters could only spend about 20 minutes over England before needing to return home. This meant bomber formations often flew unescorted for portions of their missions, allowing RAF fighters to inflict heavy losses. Despite this crucial weakness, the Bf-109E was a formidable opponent. British pilots respected it, and many died fighting it. The Bf-109 evolved continuously. The F model, introduced in 1941, many pilots considered the best handling version, beautifully balanced and a joy to fly. The G model, introduced in 1942, packed a heavier punch with larger cannons and could compete with later Allied fighters, though it sacrificed some of the earlier version's nimbleness. Legendary aces like Erich Hartmann, who scored 352 aerial victories, the most in history, flew primarily the Bf-109. Think about that number for a second. 352 victories. In the Bf-109, skilled pilots became nearly invincible. Gerhard Barkhorn scored 301 victories, Gunther Rall 275, Otto Kittel 267. These numbers seem impossible, yet they're verified. The Bf-109 in expert hands was absolutely lethal. Can you imagine the terror Allied bomber crews felt when they heard the call, "Bandits, 12 o'clock high"? Many times, those bandits were Bf-109s, diving from the sun, machine guns and cannons blazing. The Bf-109's combination of speed, climb rate, and firepower made it deadly in the right hands. However, it had quirks that never got fully resolved. narrow landing gear that caused countless ground accidents, a cramped cockpit where tall pilots struggled to fit comfortably, and controls that became heavy at high speeds. Novice pilots found it unforgiving, make a mistake during landing, and the narrow gear would catch, flipping the plane. Still, for sheer impact and longevity, few fighters matched the Bf-109's legacy. It fought on every front, in every condition, against every opponent, from 1937 to 1945. Now we reach the aircraft that represented Germany's desperate gamble on revolutionary technology. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Picture being an American B-17 pilot in late 1944, flying in formation over Germany, when suddenly something screams past at 540 miles per hour, over 100 miles per hour faster than anything you've ever seen. That was the Me-262. With 430mm cannons and optional rockets, it could shred a bomber formation in seconds. Allied fighters couldn't catch it in level flight. P-51 Mustangs, the fastest Allied fighters, topped out around 440 miles per hour. The Me-262 simply flew away from them. When Me-262s attacked bomber formations, chaos erupted. The jets would approach from head-on, where closing speeds exceeded 600 miles per hour, fire their devastating cannons, and zoom past before bomber gunners could react. Those 30mm rounds were massive. Each one could tear apart aircraft structure. A single hit could down a bomber. Allied aircrews had no effective counter. When Me-262s appeared, the only defense was prayer and evasive maneuvers, which rarely worked against such speed. So why didn't the Me-262 change the war's outcome? The reasons are frustrating and complex. Adolf Hitler initially insisted it be developed as a bomber rather than a fighter, wasting precious months on modifications that compromised its effectiveness. The jet engines of 1944 were unreliable, requiring replacement after just 25 hours of flight time. Manufacturing them required rare metals that Germany struggled to obtain. Allied bombing had destroyed many German factories and fuel supplies, meaning Me-262s often sat grounded even when available. Training jet pilots took time Germany didn't have. The jets flew so much faster than piston aircraft that experienced fighter pilots had to relearn everything. Most critically, Allied pilots developed tactics. Catch Me-262s during takeoff or landing when they were slow and vulnerable. P-51 Mustangs would patrol near known Me-262 bases, waiting for the jets to land. As a Me-262 approached the runway, slowed down and focused on landing, Mustangs would pounce. Many Me-262s were destroyed this way, shot down while helpless. Despite only 1,400 being built and fewer than 300 seeing combat, Me-262s shot down over 500 Allied aircraft while losing about 100 of their own, an impressive kill ratio. Those numbers suggest what might have been if Germany had deployed them earlier and in greater numbers. What if the Me-262 had appeared in 1942 instead of 1944? Could 2,000 operational Me-262s have driven Allied bombers from German skies? The questions haunt historians because we came terrifyingly close to finding out. Let's not forget the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, one of the most psychologically terrifying weapons ever created. The Stuka wasn't fast. In fact, it was painfully slow, cruising around 200 miles per hour. It wasn't particularly well-armed or heavily armored. But it had something unique. It was a precision dive bomber that could place a bomb within meters of its target. And those sirens. Oh, those sirens. Designers equipped Stukas with wind-powered sirens called Jericho trumpets that screamed during dives, creating a sound that haunted soldiers for the rest of their lives. Imagine being a Polish soldier in September 1939, hearing that rising shriek, watching this gull-winged aircraft plunge from the sky, knowing a 500-kilogram bomb is about to obliterate your position. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The psychological impact was devastating. Soldiers would break and flee just from hearing the sound. During the invasions of Poland and France, Stukas acted as flying artillery, destroying bridges, bunkers, and tanks with terrifying accuracy. They supported ground troops so effectively that German generals considered them indispensable. Hans-Ulrich Rudel, flying a Stuka, personally destroyed 519 tanks, 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, and 70 landing craft. 1 pilot, 1 aircraft type, Those numbers seem impossible, yet they're verified. Rudel flew over 2,500 combat missions, was shot down or crash-landed 32 times, and survived the war. His story alone justifies the Stuka's place in history. However, the Stuka had a fatal weakness. It was helpless against modern fighters. During the Battle of Britain, RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires slaughtered Stuka formations. The dive bomber was slow, lacked maneuverability, and couldn't defend itself effectively. After losing dozens in just days, Germany withdrew them from Western combat. They remained effective in the east against less organized Soviet air defenses, but the Stuka's glory days ended in 1940. Still, for sheer impact in the war's opening years, the Stuka deserves recognition. It changed how nations thought about close air support and proved that psychological weapons could be as valuable as physical ones. After examining every aircraft, considering their impact, versatility, and effectiveness, which German aircraft deserves the top spot? Many would argue for the Bf-109 or Me-262, and those arguments have merit. The Bf-109's longevity and production numbers are unmatched. The Me-262's technological leap was revolutionary. But I'm giving the crown to the Focke-Wulf FW-190, and here's why. The FW-190 combined everything a fighter needed. It was fast, heavily armed, rugged, and remained competitive throughout the war. Unlike the Me-262, which appeared too late and suffered reliability issues, or the Bf-109, which showed its age by 1944, the FW-190 evolved and improved continuously. The A model dominated in 1941 to 1943. The D model, with a liquid-cooled engine, competed effectively against P-51 Mustangs and Spitfire Mk-XIVs in 1944 to 1945. Ground attack versions devastated Allied armor and positions. The Ta-152, its ultimate evolution, was possibly the finest piston-engine fighter ever built, capable of 472 miles per hour at high altitude. FW-190 pilots consistently reported feeling confident and capable in their aircraft. It was forgiving, less prone to stalling or spinning than the Bf-109. It was strong, the radial engine and robust construction meant it could take battle damage that would down other fighters. And it was deadly, with 4 machine guns and 2 cannons as standard. It had firepower that could destroy enemy aircraft with short bursts. Allied pilots learned to respect the FW-190, and many developed specific tactics just for dealing with it. If you could have only one German aircraft to fly throughout World War II, the FW-190 would give you the best chance of survival and success. It excelled in air combat, ground attack, and even bomber interception. It served effectively from 1941 to 1945, adapting to changing circumstances. And critically, it kept pace with Allied fighter development, remaining competitive when other German designs became obsolete. The FW-190 represents the peak of German piston-engine fighter design, a masterpiece that combined practical engineering with combat effectiveness. What do these rankings teach us? German aircraft design showcased incredible innovation, from the world's first jet fighters to precision dive bombers to versatile workhorses that served in every role imaginable. Engineers pushed boundaries, trying radical concepts that other nations wouldn't dare attempt. Some worked brilliantly, some failed catastrophically, but technology alone doesn't win wars. The Me-262 proved that. You can have the most advanced weapon in the world, but if you can't produce enough of them, can't train enough people to use them, can't fuel them, and can't deploy them at the right time, they become expensive curiosities rather than war winners. Before we end, I want to hear from you. What's the best story from World War II that you think deserves to be told? Maybe it's about a particular battle that doesn't get enough attention, an unknown hero who did something extraordinary, a surprising turn of events that changed everything, or even a story passed down in your family from grandparents who lived through those years. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and your story might inspire the next deep dive we do together. The Second World War is filled with countless untold narratives. We remember the famous battles and well-known leaders, but so many incredible stories remain hidden. Sometimes the most powerful ones come from ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. People just like you and your families. Maybe your grandfather served in the Pacific or your grandmother worked in a factory building aircraft, or your family has letters from that era. These personal connections to history matter because they remind us that behind the grand strategies and famous names were millions of individual human beings. These aircraft, from the worst to the absolute best, shaped history and changed warfare forever. They represent human ingenuity, ambition, courage, and sometimes folly. Understanding them helps us understand not just the war, but the incredible bravery, innovation, and tragedy that defined that era. The engineers who designed them, the workers who built them, the pilots who flew them, and the people who fought against them, all played their parts in a conflict that reshaped our world. So remember, the next time you see one of these aircraft in a museum or documentary, you're not just looking at metal and machinery. You're looking at a piece of history that carried the hopes and fears of an entire generation. Each one tells a story worth remembering, worth studying, and worth sharing with others who want to understand how